Welcome Social Media Manager for Black Enterprise, Kristen Graves.
I requested that song. I wanted Bodak Yellow, but they didn't want it. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, ladies. Welcome to today's Power Lunch, Conversations That Count, hosted by Pfizer. Woo! This afternoon, as I look around the room, I see women of every age represented, and if your workplace is anything like mine, then this room is a fair representation of the many generations we work with side by side each day. This afternoon, we'll explore the multi-generational dynamics around work, success, and the choices women of every generation are required to make with three very special ladies. Legacy Award honoree, Jayne Kennedy Overton, and two of her three daughters, Savannah and Copper Joy. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our host for today's Power Lunch. She is the Senior Vice President and Chief Talent Officer for Pfizer, and one of BE's 2017 Top 50 Most Powerful Women in Business and Most Powerful Executives in Corporate America Award recipient. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Pamela Puryear.
All right, thank you, Pfizer. Before I let you go, I'm gonna go off script for just a second, ladies. I think it's appropriate given the generational focus of our lunch today. Kristen, I just wanted to say to you personally how wonderful it is to see the next generation of Graves women stepping into their power.
Thank you.
Following in some amazing footsteps of your grandmother, your beautiful mother, and your beautiful aunt who are with us here tonight. So I just wanted to say congratulations, and let's give Kristen a round of applause. Thank you, thank you. All right, so now for my welcome. Good afternoon, women of power. Good afternoon, and happy International Women's Day. So I'm gonna step back in history a little bit, take you to the year 1908, when 15,000 women marched across New York City demanding shorter hours, better pay, and voting rights. 3 years later, more than 1 million women and men attended International Women's Day rallies, and the journey continues. Today, 107 years later, on International Women's Day 2018, we are all gathered here today for conversations that count. In the few minutes I have with you before we welcome Jayne Kennedy and her beautiful and accomplished daughters, I wanted to have a short conversation with you that I hope will count. I was here last year for the first time, honored to be a recipient, an award recipient, during a ceremony that was held during this very luncheon. And I remember walking into a ballroom much like this one and seeing this sea of 1,000 beautiful women. And I in fact knew just a handful of the women in the room. But despite this fact, I really felt as though I belonged here in this room. At the same time, while I felt I belonged in the room, I honestly was not 100% entirely convinced that I belonged on this list of the 50 most powerful women in business list. This struggle with do we belong, how do we fit in, and are we worthy is one question, a set of questions that many of us face in our professional lives. We even heard about it this morning. It came up in the questions about the imposter syndrome. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. But I also want to highlight the fact that last year, when I walked into this room, I came alone. But I walked out knowing that I wanted to share this incredibly inspiring experience with the women of Pfizer. So in case you hadn't noticed when I walked out, I'm pleased to say that this year I have over 20 remarkable women from Pfizer, and a few male allies. Woo! Including among them Willard McLeod, who's our new head of diversity, inclusion, and culture. Welcome, Willard. This is her first outing with us from Pfizer. And we are also, I'm very proud to say, a first-time sponsor of what is a multi-year commitment to be a sponsor to the Black Enterprise Women of Power Summit. At Pfizer, we are committed to do our part to create a culture and a climate where all people feel as though they belong. And part of how we're doing this is to have an increasingly diverse executive leadership team. For the first time since we were founded in 1849, there are 5 women on our executive leadership team, 2 of whom are women of color. And 3 of our 12 board members are women. We also have more than 70 colleague resource groups with over 20,000 members. At Pfizer, 1 in 5 colleagues participates in an organization that's focused on promoting inclusive culture that embraces diversity. We also have a very active Global Women's Council that's led by our very own Sabina Ewing, who will speak on a panel tomorrow, so I encourage you all to get out and see that panel tomorrow. And that group has created unbelievably impactful campaigns that empower women to seek out positions of greater responsibility and impact. And finally, last year, we launched a series of conversations, our own conversations that count, called Inclusion Commitment Sessions, which bring together small groups of senior leaders from across Pfizer to talk about their experiences and their challenges and to share best practices related to creating and maintaining diverse and inclusive teams. So at Pfizer, we are committed to creating more opportunities for meaningful conversations that count. But the most important conversation, and here's my call of action to all of you ladies in the room, the most important conversation that needs to happen is the conversation that you have with yourself. People like Willard and I will continue doing our work as chief talent officers and chief diversity officers to work with companies and leadership teams to improve diversity and inclusion. But you, each and every one of you, also has a job to do. You must tell yourself that you belong in this room and every room that you enter. You must tell yourself that you are worthy of any and all accolades that you receive in your life and your career. You must fight against this feeling, this imposter syndrome that we keep talking about. And as you rise up, you must bring others up with you. As our friend Donna Brazil said, what did she say? Scoot over. She said, scoot over. So as I close, I'm going to introduce you to one more phrase that I recently learned. I don't know if it can top scoot over, but it's called the arrogance of belonging. The arrogance of belonging. You must have some arrogance to believe that you are allowed, even entitled, to be here, wherever here is. So while people like me work to create more inclusive cultures and climates, you must have this conversation with yourself, this conversation about belonging. It has been my absolute honor and privilege and pleasure to welcome you all to the Power Lunch today on behalf of Pfizer. Again, I'm going to wish you a happy International Women's Day, and let's please continue to have these important conversations that count. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Puryear, and thank you, Pfizer, for your committed partnership. So I just have a few quick housekeeping items before we get to our next course. First, social media. I'm a social media manager, so I'm really pushing this. Everyone use the hashtag BEWPS. There are a few giveaways that we're giving away. We're giving a Dell laptop away, and then 2 giveaways to the Grand Hyatt and the Rosewood Baja Mar Hotel in the Bahamas. So please keep using the hashtag BEWPS. And there are a few sessions that are coming up that I want to bring attention to. Preparing for the unexpected and playing to win in the face of personal and professional challenges. And then tonight, AT&T is sponsoring an intimate conversation with Shaka Pilgrim, who is the president of Rock Nation Records. And tomorrow morning kicks off with Ayanla Van Sant, hosted by Toyota. So make sure you're up bright and early. And then that's followed by From the Corner Office, featuring Richelieu Dennis, who is the founder and chairman of Essence Ventures, LLC, and CEO and chairman of Sundial Brands, hosted by Dell. Times, locations, details on all sessions, events, feature guests, and more are found on the Bizzabo app, so make sure you download the app. And ladies, you must wear your credentials. As an FYI, there is a reprint fee for all lost badges, so make sure that you always have your badges on you when you're coming to all of these events. Lastly, Black Enterprise is proud to broadcast 2 nationally syndicated television shows, Our World with Black Enterprise and Women of Power TV, which is inspired by you. Let's take a look.
We're Americans, and gun violence affects everybody.
I'm not going out every day saying, I'm gonna be a role model because I'm just as flawed as the next person.
That was the first time I disclosed that publicly, but I live with that in my heart.
I believe that as human beings, we all have a lot more power than we actually recognize.
Yeah, you can stand up and you can be a businesswoman and you can do this and you can have as many kids as you want.
I just wanted to be rich. If you came to me with a way to get rich, I bought the kit.
One of the things I like so much about Hollywood is that there are no rules.
Hollywood is more difficult to break through for people of color. It's more difficult, but it can be done.
One lady literally broke in her own lap and just bawled. So to see that, it's like, we know we're doing our part.
I've just never been that kind of an artist that felt like when I walk in a room, I need all eyes, all attention on me.
We just do what we do and it works.
I love all of it. It just takes you to a whole other place, a whole other world, and it's magical.
Dynamic, inspiring, a view from the top.
I stand on the shoulders of so many, beautiful women of color who have made beautiful, extraordinary work before me.
I want to be excellent in everything that I do.
It's the Women of Power Show, a half-hour series showcasing CEOs, entrepreneurs, and charismatic leaders from the corporate boardroom to the hills of Hollywood and everything in between. This weekly half-hour nationally syndicated television show will uplift, motivate, and celebrate women of color.
Powerful women have been around for centuries. Powerful Black women have been around for centuries.
Each week, we'll step inside the Power Suite, explore lifestyle and travel, and discover new and better ways to manage health and wellness.
Walk, attitude, and go back.
Along with celebrity interviews and segments on managing finance and careers. This show gives you a 360-degree look into the success secrets and strategies for today's women of power.
I don't care what you choose, but whatever it is, you must give it your all.
This life is yours, and it's yours alone.
It's the Women of Power Show. Embrace your power. Your moment is now.
We will now take time to enjoy our lunch and continue networking with one another. Please welcome Sheila Thompson, Director of Operations, Bay Area, California, and Hawaii for FedEx, who will give a blessing over our food.
Aloha. On behalf of the FedEx Corporation, it is such an honor to be here with you. May we all stand and hold hands. Lord, we give you thank you. We thank you for allowing us to fellowship with one another. We thank you for the gifts of wisdom, courage, and power. We thank you for the planting of the seeds of giving back, first to ourselves, so that we are able to give to our family, our friends, and our community. Bless the cooks, bless the servers, and above all, bless everyone that will eat. In his name, I say, amen. Amen. Mahalo.
Brian Rexroad's real name is Carl, named after his grandfather.
For the time we did spend together, you know, if he was fixing something, I always really enjoy watching, even just as a small child, and as I got older, I was sometimes helping him with some things. So he would have projects ready to go when we did come and visit.
And so Brian was thrilled to follow in his grandfather's footsteps to a career at AT&T.
My grandfather was Carl Rumpel. He was my mother's father. He worked for AT&T Bell Labs somewhere around 1929 to 1966, so upwards around 35 years. And he was an electrical engineer, focused mostly on developing time references and a variety of different systems or tools.
What Brian didn't know was that his grandfather had a secret use for those time references, a secret that helped to change the world.
He also worked on a project that was a voice encryption system called Sig Sally, one of the first, if not the first, voice encryption system that was used by Churchill and Roosevelt to communicate during the World War II effort.
Yes, the man Brian called Gramp was instrumental in communication between Winston Churchill and President Franklin Roosevelt as they worked to defeat Nazi Germany. With stations set up in Washington, London, and Northern Africa, Sig Sally allowed phone conversations without anyone unwanted listening in.
I suspect that his role in that was actually one of the really important aspects, which is if you have an encryption system, you have to have the key material on the two ends be exactly the same at the same time. And to have a very good time reference for that would be very important.
Brian made this discovery when he found an old journal where his grandfather referred to a mysterious Project X, something Carl wasn't allowed to talk much about. It wasn't until 30 years after the war that the project was declassified and the name Sig Sally became known to the world.
It's a privilege to be a part of the legacy. You know, this company's been around for a very long time. It's made a huge amount of contributions in the area of technology. We're actually speeding up or reviving our contribution in technology, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
He's more than a part of it. In an amazing coincidence, Brian has spent his entire career working in information security, starting with the federal government and now with AT&T for over 20 years. Just like Carl, Brian is doing his part in a different kind of war, 70 years later, but a war AT&T fights every day.
We are managing the huge amounts of data that are necessary to operate the company, managing the huge amounts of data that our customers are depending on us to deliver to the network. So security is really an important piece of this. Protecting the privacy of our customers is an important piece of this. The tendency today, and we call it threat analytics, is to tend to be looking for the threats. Well, by the time the threat has attacked, it's a little bit late. You really want to be doing something to protect before the threat comes.
And now, armed with the information that his grandfather was not only a pioneer, but a patriot, Brian couldn't be prouder, and he hopes the feeling would be mutual.
You know, when I reflect back on my grandfather, I mostly tend to think about how he would reflect on me. That is, have I really sort of fulfilled his expectations? And not that he ever placed any specific expectations, but I think my contributions, the things that I have been doing as a part of AT&T, as a part of helping to protect information, as a part of just working in the technology field, I think he would be, at the very least, satisfied, and I hope he'd be proud of me for that.
Brian Rexroad's real name is Carl, named after his grandfather.
For the time we did spend together, you know, if he was fixing something, I always really enjoy watching it, even just as a small child, and as I got older, I was sometimes helping him with some things. So he would have projects ready to go when we did come and visit.
And so Brian was thrilled to follow in his grandfather's footsteps to a career at AT&T.
My grandfather was Carl Rumpel. He was my mother's father. He worked for AT&T Bell Labs somewhere around 1929 to 1966, so upwards around 35 years. And he was an electrical engineer, focused mostly on developing time references and a variety of different systems or tools.
What Brian didn't know was that his grandfather had a secret use for those time references, a secret that helped to change the world.
He also worked on a project that was a voice encryption system called Sig Sally, one of the first, if not the first, voice encryption system that was used by Churchill and Roosevelt to communicate during the World War II effort.
Yes, the man Brian called Gramp was instrumental in communication between Winston Churchill and President Franklin Roosevelt as they worked to defeat Nazi Germany. With stations set up in Washington, London, and Northern Africa, Sig Sally allowed phone conversations without anyone unwanted listening in.
I suspect that his role in that was actually one of the really important aspects, which is if you have an encryption system, you have to have the key material on the two ends be exactly the same at the same time. And to have a very good time reference for that would be very important.
Brian made this discovery when he found an old journal where his grandfather referred to a mysterious Project X, something Carl wasn't allowed to talk much about. It wasn't until 30 years after the war that the project was declassified and the name Sig Sally became known to the world.
It's a privilege to be a part of the legacy. You know, this company's been around for a very long time. It's made a huge amount of contributions in the area of technology. We're actually speeding up or reviving our contribution in technology, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
He's more than a part of it. In an amazing coincidence, Brian has spent his entire career working in information security, starting with the federal government and now with AT&T for over 20 years. Just like Carl, Brian is doing his part in a different kind of war, 70 years later, but a war AT&T fights every day.
We are managing the huge amounts of data that are necessary to operate the company, managing the huge amounts of data that our customers are depending on us to deliver through the network. So security is really an important piece of this. Protecting the privacy of our customers is an important piece of this. The tendency today, and we call it threat analytics, is to tend to be looking for the threats. Well, by the time the threat has attacked, it's a little bit late. You really want to be doing something to protect before the threat comes.
And now, armed with the information that his grandfather was not only a pioneer, but a patriot, Brian couldn't be prouder, and he hopes the feeling would be mutual.
You know, when I reflect back on my grandfather, I mostly tend to think about how he would reflect on me. That is, have I really sort of fulfilled his expectations? And not that he ever placed any specific expectations, but I think my contributions, the things that I have been doing as a part of AT&T, as a part of helping to protect information, as a part of just working in the technology field, I think he would be, at the very least, satisfied, and I hope he'd be proud of me for that.
Brian Rexroad's real name is Carl, named after his grandfather.
For the time we did spend together, you know, if he was fixing something, I always really enjoy watching it, even just as a small child, and as I got older, I was sometimes helping him with some things. So he would have projects ready to go when we did come and visit.
And so Brian was thrilled to follow in his grandfather's footsteps to a career at AT&T.
My grandfather was Carl Rumpel. He was my mother's father. He worked for AT&T Bell Labs somewhere around 1929 to 1966, so upwards around 35 years. And he was an electrical engineer, focused mostly on developing time references and a variety of different systems or tools.
What Brian didn't know was that his grandfather had a secret use for those time references, a secret that helped to change the world.
He also worked on a project that was a voice encryption system called Sig Sally, one of the first, if not the first, voice encryption system that was used by Churchill and Roosevelt to communicate during the World War II effort.
Yes, the man Brian called Gramp was instrumental in communication between Winston Churchill and President Franklin Roosevelt as they worked to defeat Nazi Germany. With stations set up in Washington, London, and Northern Africa, Sig Sally allowed phone conversations without anyone unwanted listening in.
I suspect that his role in that was actually one of the really important aspects, which is if you have an encryption system, you have to have the key material on the two ends be exactly the same at the same time. And to have a very good time reference for that would be very important.
Brian made this discovery when he found an old journal where his grandfather referred to a mysterious Project X, something Carl wasn't allowed to talk much about. It wasn't until 30 years after the war that the project was declassified and the name Sig Sally became known to the world.
It's a privilege to be a part of the legacy. You know, this company's been around for a very long time. It's made a huge amount of contributions in the area of technology. We're actually speeding up or reviving our contribution in technology, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
He's more than a part of it. In an amazing coincidence, Brian has spent his entire career working in information security, starting with the federal government and now with AT&T for over 20 years. Just like Carl, Brian is doing his part in a different kind of war, 70 years later, but a war AT&T fights every day.
We are managing the huge amounts of data that are necessary to operate the company, managing the huge amounts of data that our customers are depending on us to deliver to the network. So security is really an important piece of this. Protecting the privacy of our customers is an important piece of this. The tendency today, and we call it threat analytics, is to tend to be looking for the threats. Well, by the time the threat has attacked, it's a little bit late. You really want to be doing something to protect before the threat comes.
And now, armed with the information that his grandfather was not only a pioneer, but a patriot, Brian couldn't be prouder, and he hopes the feeling would be mutual.
You know, when I reflect back on my grandfather, I mostly tend to think about how he would reflect on me. That is, have I really sort of fulfilled his expectations? And not that he ever placed any specific expectations, but I think my contributions, the things that I have been doing as a part of AT&T, as a part of helping to protect information, as a part of just working in the technology field, I think he would be, at the very least, satisfied, and I hope he'd be proud of me for that.
Brian Rexroad's real name is Carl, named after his grandfather.
For the time we did spend together, you know, if he was fixing something, I always really enjoy watching, even just as a small child, and as I got older, I was sometimes helping him with some things. So he would have projects ready to go when we did come and visit.
And so Brian was thrilled to follow in his grandfather's footsteps to a career at AT&T.
My grandfather was Carl Rumpel. He was my mother's father. He worked for AT&T Bell Labs somewhere around 1929 to 1966, so upwards around 35 years. And he was an electrical engineer, focused mostly on developing time references and a variety of different systems or tools.
What Brian didn't know was that his grandfather had a secret use for those time references, a secret that helped to change the world.
He also worked on a project that was a voice encryption system called Sig Sally, one of the first, if not the first, voice encryption system that was used by Churchill and Roosevelt to communicate during the World War II effort.
Yes, the man Brian called Gramp was instrumental in communication between Winston Churchill and President Franklin Roosevelt as they worked to defeat Nazi Germany. With stations set up in Washington, London, and Northern Africa, Sig Sally allowed phone conversations without anyone unwanted listening in.
I suspect that his role in that was actually one of the really important aspects, which is if you have an encryption system, you have to have the key material on the two ends be exactly the same at the same time. And to have a very good time reference for that would be very important.
Brian made this discovery when he found an old journal where his grandfather referred to a mysterious Project X, something Carl wasn't allowed to talk much about. It wasn't until 30 years after the war that the project was declassified and the name Sig Sally became known to the world.
It's a privilege to be a part of the legacy. You know, this company's been around for a very long time. It's made a huge amount of contributions in the area of technology. We're actually speeding up or reviving our contribution in technology, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
He's more than a part of it. In an amazing coincidence, Brian has spent his entire career working in information security, starting with the federal government and now with AT&T for over 20 years. Just like Carl, Brian is doing his part in a different kind of war, 70 years later, but a war AT&T fights every day.
We are managing the huge amounts of data that are necessary to operate the company, managing the huge amounts of data that our customers are depending on us to deliver through the network. So security is really an important piece of this. Protecting the privacy of our customers is an important piece of this. The tendency today, and we call it threat analytics, is to tend to be looking for the threats. Well, by the time the threat has attacked, it's a little bit late. You really want to be doing something to protect before the threat comes.
And now, armed with the information that his grandfather was not only a pioneer, but a patriot, Brian couldn't be prouder, and he hopes the feeling would be mutual.
You know, when I reflect back on my grandfather, I mostly tend to think about how he would reflect on me. That is, have I really sort of fulfilled his expectations? And not that he ever placed any specific expectations, but I think my contributions, the things that I have been doing as a part of AT&T, as a part of helping to protect information, as a part of just working in the technology field, I think he would be, at the very least, satisfied, and I hope he'd be proud of me for that.
Brian Rexroad's real name is Carl, named after his grandfather.
For the time we did spend together, you know, if he was fixing something, I always really enjoy watching it, even just as a small child, and as I got older, I was sometimes helping him with some things. So he would have projects ready to go when we did come and visit.
And so Brian was thrilled to follow in his grandfather's footsteps to a career at AT&T.
My grandfather was Carl Rumpel. He was my mother's father. He worked for AT&T Bell Labs somewhere around 1929 to 1966, so upwards around 35 years. And he was an electrical engineer, focused mostly on developing time references and a variety of different systems or tools.
What Brian didn't know was that his grandfather had a secret use for those time references, a secret that helped to change the world.
He also worked on a project that was a voice encryption system called Sig Sally, one of the first, if not the first, voice encryption system that was used by Churchill and Roosevelt to communicate during the World War II effort.
Yes, the man Brian called Gramp was instrumental in communication between Winston Churchill and President Franklin Roosevelt as they worked to defeat Nazi Germany. With stations set up in Washington, London, and Northern Africa, Sig Sally allowed phone conversations without anyone unwanted listening in.
I suspect that his role in that was actually one of the really important aspects, which is if you have an encryption system, you have to have the key material on the two ends be exactly the same at the same time. And to have a very good time reference for that would be very important.
Brian made this discovery when he found an old journal where his grandfather referred to a mysterious Project X, something Carl wasn't allowed to talk much about. It wasn't until 30 years after the war that the project was declassified and the name Sig Sally became known to the world.
It's a privilege to be a part of the legacy. You know, this company's been around for a very long time. It's made a huge amount of contributions in the area of technology. We're actually speeding up or reviving our contribution in technology, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
He's more than a part of it. In an amazing coincidence, Brian has spent his entire career working in information security, starting with the federal government and now with AT&T for over 20 years. Just like Carl, Brian is doing his part in a different kind of war, 70 years later, but a war AT&T fights every day.
We are managing the huge amounts of data that are necessary to operate the company, managing the huge amounts of data that our customers are depending on us to deliver through the network. So security is really an important piece of this. Protecting the privacy of our customers is an important piece of this. The tendency today, and we call it threat analytics, is to tend to be looking for the threats. Well, by the time the threat has attacked, it's a little bit late. You really want to be doing something to protect before the threat comes.
And now, armed with the information that his grandfather was not only a pioneer, but a patriot, Brian couldn't be prouder, and he hopes the feeling would be mutual.
You know, when I reflect back on my grandfather, I mostly tend to think about how he would reflect on me. That is, have I really sort of fulfilled his expectations? And not that he ever placed any specific expectations, but I think my contributions, the things that I have been doing as a part of AT&T, as a part of helping to protect information, as a part of just working in the technology field, I think he would be, at the very least, satisfied, and I hope he'd be proud of me for that.
Derek T. Dingle.
So is everyone having a good time? I know I can say that I wouldn't want to be any other place in the world right now, but right here. You all look wonderful. So we've shared an enjoyable meal. Now it's time for a bit of engaging conversation, though not just between women of different generations, but between a mother and her daughters. Our guests today are more than just family. They are awe-inspiring businesswomen bonded by shared experiences, but each offering uniquely individual perspectives of world, work, and expectations. Last night, you learned our Legacy Award honoree, Jayne Kennedy Overton, carved out her path during an era less tolerant of women in the workplace, especially in non-traditional areas. Fast forward several decades, and the rules have changed. Endless opportunities to explore what a woman may do have become the norm. Joining Jayne are two of her daughters, Joy Overton, a social media connoisseur with a passion for all things creative and innovative. She serves as Associate Manager for Social Media and Public Relations for Jack's Pacific, a children's entertainment and toy manufacturing company. And Savannah Overton, the Director of Enrollment and Educational Partnerships for the Duke Ellington School of the Arts. Savannah harbors a passion for shaping minds of our youth and vows to shake up the world. So, please give me a warm welcome to Copper Joyce, Savannah, and Legacy Award honoree, Jayne Kennedy Overton, joined by our moderator, our own Caroline Clarke.
Okay. Hi.
Hello. Hello. Glad to be here. Welcome, everybody.
Hello. So just so everybody knows, this is Savannah.
Hello.
And this is Copper.
Hello.
And there are two more. So can we please have Cheyenne and Zaire stand? Cheyenne is an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And Zaire very much wanted the room to know she just graduated from college in May and she's looking. International affairs, 2 words, that's all I'm gonna say. Okay, Zaire, we're good.
I'll vouch for her.
We all
I'll vouch for all my daughters. Yes, thank you. I'm proud of every single one of them.
So as we start down this road, let's begin by just giving everyone some background. This is sort of a multi-generational conversation about success, right? There's been a lot of talk in all the sessions today about millennials, and those of us who are not millennials. And all of your daughters are millennials. The world has changed so much. The frameworks around which we create life and work have changed so much. And you married straight out of high school, right? College was just not affordable at the time. You got married right away and moved to Hollywood, and the rest is history to some degree. But your road to motherhood was an interesting one as well. Can you share how that all came about?
Well, I always wanted a family because I come from a very large family. My sister Brenda is in the audience as well. Brenda's my baby sister. She's from Ohio. As a matter of fact, let me give her props. She was one of the very first class of the female state troopers in the Ohio State Highway Patrol. So don't mess with her because she carried, and she knows self-defense, and she's the one that taught me how to take care of myself. So yeah, props to Brenda. But my family, my father came from a family of 11 children, and my mom from 13. And we have cousins all up and down the eastern seaboard. So a big family, and family was something that was extremely important to all of us. So I knew at some point that I wanted to have my own children. I didn't know that it would be all girls. So Bill was like in the outhouse. I said, you know, Bill, you're welcome to come. He said, no, I have had enough women in my life. So we love you, Dad. Yeah, he said, y'all got that. But I was married for 10 years before, and we did not have children, but I knew that I wanted to, and I always felt like I was on the road working so much. I was blessed to have the opportunity to work a lot. I got my first job only being in Hollywood within 1 month, and it just seemed that consistently there was work for me. And I know that God had his hand in my life, and I was willing to listen to what he was trying to tell me. But at some point, you know, I just decided that I was going to delay having children because I knew that at that time, you couldn't really have children and be an actress in Hollywood. And there was no way I was going to be on the NFL Today pregnant. That was just not going to happen. So I had delayed, and I ended up with endometriosis. I'd been healthy my entire life. And I ended up with a disease that the only treatment and the only cure, not even a cure, but the only treatment to make you feel better, because it was extremely painful. My doctor said to me, we've tried everything. The only thing we haven't tried is pregnancy. And I just said, okay, God, I'm listening. And Bill and I hadn't even talked about getting married. We certainly hadn't talked about having a family. And I said, you know, I want to have a baby. And he said, no, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. And I said, I want to have a baby. And I took my birth control pills, flushed them down the toilet, and doctor said, it's going to be a long time because with endometriosis, you're not going to be able to get pregnant right away. And within 3 months, I was pregnant. I was with me. Yeah, I was doing. So you're welcome.
Hey, we all helped. We all helped.
But I was doing a show in Australia, and the doctor said, you know, I felt funny, so I went in before I left. He said, no, you're not pregnant. And Bill went with me, and he didn't stay as long as I did. So I was working one day, and I came back to the hotel, and he had written in soap on the mirror, I love both of you. And so I came home, and I said, I think I'm pregnant. And the doctor said, yeah, so he still hasn't paid up. Lloyd Gregg is his name. He still hasn't paid up and given us the dinner he was supposed to treat us to if I was pregnant, if Bill won the bet. But Savannah was born, and she was the joy of my life. Cheyenne was about two or three at that point. Bill was married before to Kathleen Bradley. And by the way, we have an amazing extended, blended family relationship. We all decided that we were going to make it work, and it wasn't even hard. I mean, Cheyenne, I love her like she's my own daughter, you know, and she's here tonight, you know, because I wanted her. You know, I've always told her, I want you. You know, you are part of my family. You are my daughter. And I love you too, baby. And you know, she's told people, you know, she calls me mom, and they say, well, I thought Kathy was your mom. She said, well, Jayne treats me like I'm her daughter, so she's my mom. And they're all, you know, this is her sister. Yes, it is.
Initially, I know Savannah went on the road with you. You know, you folded her in, you were doing the whole juggling act, you were doing the whole balancing. And at a certain point, and I know from you that it was really at the height of your earning power, which you discovered in a very specific way, you pivoted out to be mom. Can you talk about that decision?
Well, it was a compilation of several events, because with the endometriosis, I did get pregnant, and as long as I was pregnant and as long as I continued to breastfeed, I was pain free. And at that same point, I had the Love Your Body exercise program, and but when I was in pain, I couldn't even do one sit-up. So as soon as I stopped breastfeeding, the pain came back, and then I had copper 3 years later. So I was pain-free, but then I was... But then I started going crazy, because then you got, you know, 2 kids, and I was on the road. I was still working. I said I was going to be a mom and stay home with my kids, but I didn't do that. I took them with me, and they would, you know, like we would come here today, and the babies, they would grab the mic like it was their show. And we would come out of, you know, the airport, and they'd be waving to crowds and stuff like that, you know, so.
We got our own mics now.
Yeah. But, so it was part of that, you know, in that the disease helped to make me make the decision. Circumstances in my life helped me to make the decision, but it wasn't a difficult one at all, because I knew I wanted to be the mom that was there when they had their first date. I wanted to be the mom when, you know, make their prom dresses. I didn't want them raised by a nanny. I wanted them to be people that I loved and respected, not just liked just because they were my kids. But they've made me so proud. I wouldn't change a thing. But I knew that there was no way I was going to...
I didn't know it was going to happen that early.
I knew that there was not going to be a way for me to maintain my career because I was only home 28 days out of the year. I was not going to be that kind of mom.
Yeah. But at the moment you made that decision, I know you had just gotten an endorsement deal with Jovan.
Yes.
And you told this story. Can you share that? They had hired 4 people, right? White couple, black couple.
That was probably the most significant highlight in my entire career. I'd been an actress, a sports broadcaster, a singer, dancer. I'd done everything because they can tell you, you know, if you just try to be an actress, back then there weren't that many parts. So you could wait forever and you could go broke and you could be standing in the unemployment line every week, every 2 weeks or whatever it was. But I always created opportunities for myself, and so it didn't matter to me. I just loved my work. I never wanted to be the person that went out and said, hey, I want to be a star. I want to walk into a stadium and everybody calls my name. I want to have, we didn't even have Google back then, but I didn't want to have, you know, so many tweets and all of that. You know, it wasn't about that. I loved my work. I loved my job, and I wanted to do that, you know. But I got sidetracked.
But you were typically paid less. You were typically paid less, and,
yes.
and with Jovan, for the first time,
on the
you weren't.
NFL Today, I was paid $40,000 a year on the NFL Today. That was nothing compared to the millions that the men were making and the hundreds of thousands that the other female was making at that particular time. $40,000, of which 10% went to my agent who didn't even get me the job. I had to get it myself. And then, you know, you pay a publicist and you pay a manager and you're, you know, paying Uncle Sam. And I'm walking home with like $10,000 to be on the #1 Emmy Award-winning sports show in the country. And it didn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, we were making movies for $100,000 for the entire budget of a motion picture. So there was no money to be made. People tell me all the time, you know, oh, you're rich, you know, but there was no money. There was never any money for that. So when I got hired for Jovan, and it was me, Billy D. Williams, well, I should put me last, right? Billy D. Williams, Morgan Fairchild, Lee Horsley, and myself. And it was a 4-person campaign. When I found out that I got the same amount of money as the 2 white stars, I'd worked 10 years to be able to be thought an equal. And here I was working for a corporation that was willing to pay me the same amount of money that they paid Morgan Fairchild. I'd never been in that situation before. And I was also pregnant with Savannah.
My bad.
So it was a difficult decision, it was. After all of the work and the hardship and all the nights on the road, when I traveled on the road, I didn't have an entourage, I didn't have a group, I wasn't in a band. I traveled by myself, afraid to go out at night because the maitre d' or the concierge would say, Miss Kennedy, you can't go out by yourself. You're not in that part of town. You can't do that. Or you go into a restaurant and then, you know, you guys are trying to pick you up. And so I just stayed in my room and I would order my room service and I'd go room to room, city to city, airline to airline, and I never got a chance to find what my true purpose was in life. So when I had the opportunity to start a family, it was more than just having a family. It was, this is what God wanted me to do, and I wasn't going to screw it up.
So girls, you didn't grow up with Jayne Kennedy, the superstar.
No,
you
they
grew
did
up with
not.
Jayne Kennedy, the mom. And when I interviewed your mom for Women of Power TV, hint, hint, she made a point of saying, and Zaire was there, that you all kind of hit her one day with, wow, Mom, if you'd have stayed in it, like really, our lives would have been lit. You know, she wouldn't have still been making $40,000 a year, you know. They were like, we would have had a whole different deal. But yet I know that you very, very much appreciate the sacrifices that she made and the choices that she made. So talk a little bit to us about looking at your mother's life choices as you now craft your own lives and careers, and what your perspective on the choices she made are, and what you foresee doing.
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah,
You are the first.
I mean, it's everything. You know, we grew up, you know, born and raised in Santa Monica, California, and the entire community has, you know, my best friend's dad is Frank Stifle, who just won Best Documentary Short at the Oscars, you know, and you grow up with that community of people who are brilliant and powerful and do a lot of really wonderful things. And we knew about the history and the legacy. And, you know, we would get stopped in grocery stores. Is that Jayne Kennedy? Is that Jayne Kennedy? Or you really look like that woman? And she goes, well, I am, you know. And it's been so great to kind of see that. But I always remember, and you may need to pass me the tissue in a minute, but my mom said to me a long, long time ago, I think I was maybe 15, she said, my 30s were the best time in my life because I knew who I was. My identity had been developed. You know, I wasn't always trying to be somebody else or trying to do something. I knew what I wanted and I was going after it. And so I waited through my 20s. I've bounced around. I've had a very non-traditional career with education and corporate and, you know, all that entertainment. But what has been really interesting to hear from her is that she was focused on making sure that we were confident in ourselves. And she spent the time stepping away from the limelight to make sure that we were powerful young women and we were intelligent and we understood grace and dignity and integrity. And so as I am learning about who I am as a woman in a career that has been a lot of different things and I'm excited to explore the new opportunities in front of me, she always said that once you know yourself, you will be able to parlay that into opportunities of excellence and of power. And so I'm really excited because I'm not concerned about having it all, you know, right now. You know, I don't need to have a big house. I don't need to have, you know, get married and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, Jairus, I've been with him for 7 years, but you know what I mean? Like I'm not racing down the aisle because I understand that 7 years. Okay. Oh, thanks, guys. But I'm not concerned about what the standards are for people around me because the best standard I have in the room is right here, you know? So I'm good.
Oh, you got a tissue box?
Yeah. Copper, I know that you've you know, taken in all of the same things from your mother. How did she convey those values and how have they factored into the new world that you're moving through?
I think basically everything that Savannah just said, and I have 2 of those phenomenal people to look up to, 3 of them. I have a little baby sister to look up to as well because she's equally as phenomenal. But for me, something I mentioned to you last night, it's interesting for me because always growing up, I would hear about Jayne Kennedy, and I was like, okay, that's mom to me. I get it. I see where you guys are going with that. She's great, cool. I see the covers and everything, but I never got to really see that because I was so young and I didn't do as much as the limelight stuff that Savannah did. So now, seeing her come back up as Jayne Kennedy, I think that it is one of the coolest things in the world because I'm like, oh, so this is who y'all been talking about? Okay, I see it. And it's so incredible for me because like, I do work in social media, but something that I pride myself on is that out of all the people that I work with and all the other influencers that I see and all the other social media managers, I see them do things that are out of their character, which is interesting to me because thankfully the way that my mom raised us, I could never see myself doing something like that because that's not how I was raised, regardless of the media attention or anything. I do stuff because I want to do it or because it's powerful or because it means something to me. And I think that going back to the confidence, it's just, you only have one body, you have one life, you have one chance, and I have that tatted on my arms because I believe in that so much. And I just think that there's been nobody like my mom that has had the confidence in me, other than my father too, but like anybody else, and I don't think that that's measurable at all.
I know that education was really important in your household.
Yes.
And Jayne did not get to go to college, but when Zaire just graduated in May, you all did this really phenomenal thing.
Yes, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, yes, I know. Cheyenne is raising her hand because she's like, my idea, you know, they're so shy and retiring, all of them.
It was my idea.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Let
yeah.
her get there.
Only a few of us could fit on the stage, but obviously. So here's the
I said, I
story.
want all 4 of my girls on stage. And they say, well, the stage is not that big.
And then we get here, and it's huge. And she's looking at me like, what? Okay. So.
I did.
She
I said,
did.
wait a minute,
Okay.
wait a minute.
So here's the story. So Zaire graduated in May, and the daughters all, Copper's wonderful suggestion, they did this beautiful thing, which is going to get like every mother in here with the tissues. We only have a few boxes. But they had, Jayne throws a party, and she's thinking, you know, as moms do, it's all about the girls. It's all about Zaire. This is her moment. And the girls got together, and they bought a cap and gown, and they had embroidered on the back each one of their years of graduation and colleges. And they presented it to Jayne on the stage and said, Mom, you have graduated 4 times.
Amen.
I didn't do it without you.
Yeah. Okay. She was sobbing.
She was sobbing.
Like ugly tears. It was so good, so worth it.
Which is hard to do. But one of the things that I think is so interesting about all of you is that there is this mutual thing going on where Jayne has raised these girls, and now, in a way, they're raising you back, right? So as you now relaunch yourself into a public space, you are looking to them for guidance. And I saw you do it, because when we did the interview for Women of Power, she installed Zaire basically as a producer. So she's looking over, you know, checking the camera, how's my lighting, how's my makeup, and Zaire was like on it. She was like, no, fix the hair, stop, roll, no. I'm like, okay.
She did it like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
she was
she
getting
did.
touched up. She's like, she's not gonna like that, a little darker.
Yeah. So you know, they've learned obviously so much from you. What are you learning from them now as you look to renew your career and reinvent yourself?
Well, I say, you know, how about this picture? No, Mom, let me shoot some more pictures, you know. Or how about these shoes? No, Mom.
Dear God, don't let her
you
take
have
a
to buy
selfie.
these shoes. Don't let me take a selfie, right. How do I do this, Copper? You know how it is. Y'all ladies know, you know. I don't know how to work my iPhone. Copper, give me a social media 101.
You gotta know your angles. You know, it's all about the angles.
So, I mean, it's like a new world. And sure, I was, you know, when Zaire graduated, and I knew that I was going to go back to school, go back to work, school. And I kind of related to school because I figured I'd have to relearn the industry. There's so much that has changed in the last, I think the last actual job that I worked was, Copper was 5 years old. So 23 years ago.
Good thing I'm young. I would have been mad if you said that if I was older.
But you know, so much has changed. And so, you know, I'm worried when I get into the studio, am I going to know that technology? But then I started thinking, you know, I didn't know live television when I first did live television. I didn't know so much. There weren't role models for me. There, you know, back in the 70s, there wasn't anybody that I could go to and say, hey, how do you do this? You know, hook me up with some person, or, you know, introduce me to this and that, and how do you handle these situations? I didn't have those people as resources, and I had to figure it out on my own. So I always tell myself, my mantra in life, you know, even with my divorce and with everything else in my life, I've done it before, I can do it again. And I just never let things stop me. And so I figure, you know, this is going to come easy because I know that I have the power to make it happen. And just enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ups, enjoy the downs. No matter what happens, it's going to be a learning experience. And my girls are going to be there to back me up every single step of the way.
Got that right.
And I do it for them because I want to create a platform for them. I want them to share in the experiences that I've had, because my life was incredible. I mean, you know, I graduated high school I was Miss Ohio when I was still in 12th grade, but I graduated from this small town and never thought I would ever get west of Mississippi. And Muhammad Ali was fighting Joe Frazier, and we'd gotten tickets to go see, you know how it was one of the first big screen broadcasts of a professional fight. And so they had oversold the tickets at Tri-C Community College in Cleveland, Ohio. And we're standing there trying to get in, and literally it was like a wave of people, and you couldn't move because everybody was shoulder to shoulder, and you move this way and everybody moved that way. You move this way, everybody moved that way, and back and forth. And nobody was going in. And apparently they oversold the tickets, and somehow, you know, people got pushed through the glass windows. Oh, wow. And so then we started escaping through the glass windows, and we got to a barbed wire fence, and I had on a long maxi coat, those long maxi coats that they used to have back then. And we were trying to figure out how we were going to get over barbed wire fence. I took my coat off, threw it over the barbed wire, we climbed over the fence, and we ended up going to another venue to see the fight. And then that was in 1971, and then in 1975, October 1st, I'm sitting ringside at the Thriller in Manila, and I'm going, how did this happen? Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm on an airplane with Bob Hope, and he says, everybody sleep, and we're on the Christmas tour, and everybody's asleep, and he's walking through the cabin, and he says, Jayne, you know, come on up to the cockpit. He said, I want to show you something, because everybody's asleep but me. And so I went up to the cockpit, and he said, take a look out the window, and there was a jet escort with military weapons at the ready because North Vietnam had decided that they were going to attack us while we were there. And I'm sitting in the cockpit with a fighter jet escort and guns trained. India said we couldn't fly over them. And I'm going, how did I get here? No. It was a great thing. I was never scared. I was nervous, but I was never afraid because I really believed that God had a plan for me that was greater than the plan that I had for myself. Yeah. Because so many amazing things happened that it was only because of God that it happened. Amen. I could have never dreamt it in my wildest imagination. And so I wanted to be able to share that with my girls. So any part of that. And so the fact that I got invited here out of the blue. I mean, you guys didn't know that I was relaunching. I didn't even know I was relaunching my career until last year. And, you know, Frank Wheaton, you know, I've known Frank because when I did Greatest Sports Legends, I interviewed Bob Beamon, and he represented Bob Beamon at the time. He was there. And I bumped into him last year, and I said, hey, we need to talk. I'm sorry, I probably scared him too. But, you know, just sometimes things in your life happen at the right time. Yeah. And you have to be willing, like I was saying last night, you have to be willing to acknowledge the signs and be aware of them when God sends you messages. Right. And be willing to act on them when they happen. Right. Absolutely.
That cockpit story, warrior move.
Right. Hey, yes. Wakanda forever.
Yeah.
Like it.
Did I say it right?
Oh, Lord Jesus. This is what I'm talking about. It's a work in progress.
So.
Okay, wait. No. Let me do it again. You're good.
So as you watch your daughters now all, you know, launch as you're relaunching, and you see that the world has changed so much, and you see that the pathways are not as prescribed, although yours was not really prescribed either. What are you most concerned about for them, and what do you most wish for them? And then I want to know from you girls what you most wish for your mother and what your concerns are as she relaunches.
Well, probably my biggest concern is that I really thought, I mean, I grew up in the 60s. So, I mean, you know what it was like, what we went through as children of the 60s. I really thought that I had left that behind us. I really thought that we had advanced as a culture here in America. In my heart, I truly believed it. And I knew that opportunities were coming my way that would be available for me, that weren't available to me back in the 70s. I mean, you know, magazines would tell you, we don't put blacks on the covers. Black Enterprise never said that. Ebony never said that. Essence never said that.
Well, and you told me you did the Playboy cover
Yes.
Which at the time was not consistent with your brand or
No, it
your
was not.
parents' values.
I got a lot of
But you
flack.
did it because it was the only majority magazine to ever offer to put you on the cover.
It was and Hugh Hefner decided, he said, Jayne deserves a magazine cover. She deserves to be on a crossover cover. And we were going to do this to promote the movie Body and Soul.
Right.
And it was the first, and it was significant in that light, but it cost a great deal for me personally. But you see, now today, I remember the very first day that I was driving down the street and I saw a bus go by and it had Kerry Washington wrapped around the side of the bus when Scandal first came on. And I had to stop because I said, oh my God.
Yep.
Look what it took to get there. Look what it took to get there. She's on the side of a bus. And then I see Will Smith, and he's, you know, blazing and fire behind him and everything, and Bad Boys, you know, and he's on a giant billboard, and he didn't have to be put behind a white guy. And, you know, because people don't understand, you know, some of the people in the industry today, they say, you know, oh, it's so hard, you know, and, you know, the challenges and parts are not being off. I said, you have no idea. You just don't know. You are so blessed. You are so grateful. I teach classes at USC. My youngest went to USC. And at the Annenberg School of Communication, they invited me to come in and talk to their sports journalism class about, you know, my experiences in sports broadcasting. And the very first thing that I said, no, it's the Les Movie Center. Deborah Langford knows it. I mean, we shot Deborah's interview there. Thanks, Debbie, by the way. But the very first thing that I said to the students is, you don't know how blessed you are. Do not take this for granted. Make the most of the opportunities that you have today. I begged CBS to teach me how to do live television broadcasting. I got the job on the NFL Today. I'd never done live television before. I asked them to please teach me how to do live TV. They never did. They never did. And I'd never stepped, you know, here I'm thrown in and we're doing 11 to 14 live broadcasts in one day. And the very first interview that I ever did, I was Sam Ratigliano with the Cleveland Browns. He was the head coach. And we're doing the countdown in my earpiece, and the director says to me, and we're on 10, 9, 8, and he says, oh, Jayne, the tape machine just ate up your tape. You're going to have to fill for 3 minutes. My very first day. And then I get to jump fast forward, and I'm pregnant in Australia with Savannah, and I'm working for Dick Clarke Productions. And Dick Clarke comes in, and I'm co-hosting with David Hasselhoff. And Dick Clarke comes in, and he says, we have some bad news. It's 10 minutes to airtime. We're doing the Miss USA pageant, the Miss Universe pageant. And, no, I'm sorry, it was the most beautiful girl in the world pageant, whatever. And he says, they're all the same.
Somebody pretty.
some beauty pageant. And he said, power failure. And our motherboard went out, the computer board, the entire computer. He said there's no way, and the, you know, beauty pageants and the whole beginning of the show is pre-tape packages of what they've been doing the 2 weeks before they got there. And all that's dumped. And we've got 13 minutes to fill on live television. And he looked at me, he says, but you know how to do this. He said, so I'm putting on a tux and I'm gonna go on stage with you and we're gonna fill for 13 minutes. That is one of the most difficult things in the world to do. But Dick Clarke, I used to watch him on my little black and white television sitting on the floor of my living room in Cleveland. And here he was telling me that he believed in me. So, you know, things that are thrown your way, you have to just...
Gotta go with it.
And this is American Bandstand.
So you were gonna say, given all those things, in one sense it's easier today, certainly, than you had it. In other ways, it's more difficult. As they move out into their careers, what are your greatest concerns and your
My greatest concern is, and I sidetracked, I'm sorry about that. But my greatest concern is that they are now in a world where we have a president that doesn't care about them. And I have worked and sacrificed everything for the last 20 plus years so that they could be in a position where they could maximize their fullest potential, and everything that they have to bring to the table, they would be able to do that. and spread the word so that, I mean, I have my 4 daughters here, but I actually have like 50 daughters between their friends that I've helped and people that we've gotten along the way. And, you know, I coached in soccer and I managed Zaire's soccer team. Zaire's an amazing goalkeeper. And I managed her soccer team because I saw some young ladies that had incredible opportunity, experience and talent, but they couldn't afford to play professional sports like club soccer. They couldn't afford it. And so there was no way that I was going to let that happen. So I found scholarships for them. I found sponsors for them. And they're now going to Yale, to Columbia, to NYU. And you know, so that's the way I have to carry that forward. So I want them to be able to do that in this world. But if we have, you know, a society and a culture that's now telling them that race is going to keep them back, that gender is going to keep them back, I didn't sacrifice all that to have them in this country, in this culture today. And I want to be able to change that for them because the cost has been too great.
Right, yeah, yeah.
We're going to open up to questions in 2 minutes, so get yourselves ready and start waving hands and the mics will come to you. Copper, as your mother relaunches her career and sort of reinvents herself, given what you know about the landscape she's facing, what's your greatest concern? What's your greatest hope for her?
Concern? I wouldn't really say that I have one because there's nothing I think could ever break my mom or nothing that she can't do. I have so much faith in her that whatever she needs, like even though she sometimes doesn't know her angles, she always gets those likes and those followers. So I'm excited. No, I'm just kidding. But I want her to be able to know that regardless of all the other phenomenal women that are out there doing things now, whether, I don't know all of their stories or what they went through, but the fact that she was one of the first and she will always be our first, I think that means the most to me. And just making sure that she knows inside who she is to everybody and us specifically. And till this day, we still get stopped. Jayne Kennedy's your mother? Yeah, she is. That's right.
But can I I'm sorry, just one little, fine, go ahead, you go.
No, it's okay.
Just really cute, I'll make it short. I talk too much, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I had picked them up from school one day, and we had gone to the grocery store. We were on our way home, and we're driving down the boulevard, and the radio's blasting, and Mos Def is singing Miss Fat Booty. And he goes, girl, this lady, she was so fine. She was like, oh man, word. She looked like Jayne Kennedy to my mom, man. You know, and I slammed on the brake. Zaire said, did he just say your name? But that's the way my kids were raised. It wasn't a culture where they recognized me as Jayne Kennedy. It was mom, you know. And so Mos Def singing about Jayne Kennedy. And the next day I went to school, and the principal at school, everybody was like, a rapper is singing your name.
So now you got street cred now.
I got street cred.
But yeah.
Savannah, talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is a big word in my life right now is transition. And I think that I'm sure a lot of you wouldn't be where you are today if you had not persevered through one or several transitions in your life at any given period of time. And I think that to see my mom transition through, you know, a daughter, a sister, you know, a wife again, and then a mother, an entertainer, a mother, an icon. Seeing that has been really, really amazing, and I think it speaks to my heart because I know that the different pulls that I feel, you know, the tension on, you know, do I reach out and explore that opportunity as an entrepreneur? I really like this steady paycheck. You know what I mean? You know, do I take those chances? And realizing that I am capable and I am able because I have such a wonderful role model in my life. Seeing her now, I'm not, as Copper said, I'm not concerned. I'm just curious as hell as to, you know, what that next step is going to be for her. And I'm so glad to see the other honorees last night transitioning. They're all in this transitional moment in their lives. And I think that's something that I'm taking away from this conference is that transition is powerful, you know, and transition means that my dad always says, never be the smartest person in the room. And so I'm like, great, you know, all these people in the room, you know, that's fantastic. That means that I've got all these people to look up to and to share, even if they're my sister, my colleague, you know, whatever that relationship they may have in my life, they are going to add to my journey and my purpose. And so knowing and seeing what she's able to accomplish, I think that the people that have surrounded her are going to help propel her to that next part of her journey. And that gives me confidence in where my next step is going.
I love that. Do we have a question? Is there a question anywhere?
So bright.
I can't really.
Oh, all the way in the back, I think, over there.
Thank you for the lights. That helps.
Hi, Jayne.
Hello.
My name is Pamela. I just got off the phone with my sister in Detroit. She wanted me to tell you that she loves you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
You know, we've known about you. We've watched your career, my mother and my father. We knew you were a very beautiful woman, but even more importantly, we knew you were internally a very genuine and sincere person. And I think I've got that confirmation today with how you've raised your daughters.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
My question to you is, as you transition to your new career, what are your hopes? What are your expectations? Because I know sometimes Hollywood is not kind to women that are seasoned or have years of experience. What do you hope for?
I'm going to have to remember that. That's a great way to put it. I'm not 66, okay. I'm seasoned.
Yes, well, first of all, I hope you get the money that you do for the NFL.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I would love to see you back in that arena getting what you deserve.
You guys should hear her during Super Bowl games. I mean, we don't even have to have the sound on. No. She's calling the whole game the whole time.
Not even Super Bowl, USC.
Yeah, USC football. She's the loudest one.
Oh, man.
Sorry, answer the question. Yes.
Well, I grew up in a family that loved sports, so that was, you know, an obvious choice. I had to fight for that, though. They didn't give me that opportunity. I had to fight pulling teeth to get that opportunity. So yes, there are going to be a lot of different things. One of the things that I want to do is we've launched a speaking series called It's a Mother-Daughter Thing, where I worked with my girls to give them the opportunity to launch their individual platforms. Copper in social media, Savannah in education, Zaire in international relations, and Shine in talking about motherhood and the working with children with Down syndromes and autism and things of that nature. So the fact that I've been able to open doors, I'm hoping that I can open doors for them and give them an opportunity to do things. Zaire's been talking about the opportunity for African American youth to do study abroad or travel abroad, to be able to experience what it's like to be an African American from the eyes of a foreigner. And she's done study abroads two in Brazil. She's been to Argentina, she's been to London, she's been to Paris. And mind you, you know, I haven't been working, and these girls, they went to college, so somebody had to figure out how to get scholarships and stuff like that. So they've all been busting it trying to make sure that they got the education that they hoped for. And that's what I tried to help with the other girls, too. So launching It's a Mother-Daughter Thing, finishing up playing Jayne, and thank you so much, Donna Brazil, for looking up on Amazon this morning. I found out about that, but it's not out right now. So I'm going to have to make sure you get an autographed copy, since you were the first person to call Amazon and ask for it. But it will launch, right now it's with the editor. I finished it, but it's with the editor, and we've got a lot more, you know, several more months to work. So it'll be first quarter of 2019. And Plain Jane is the name of the book. And it's going to be very interesting to talk about a lot of things. Yeah. I knew that I wanted to be authentic. Yeah. And so there are a lot of things that I speak from my heart. And I speak because it's a truth, but also because it was cathartic for me to write it. Right. And the whole point of writing it was to find out a purpose. And I think I found it. because there's now going to be another book. Because I realize now, after I finish, there's an overtime version. Forget the game is over, but now we're into overtime. Yeah. So then reality shows and things of that nature, and a dramatic television series. I'm going to use Donna Brazile. I'm developing a property called Maggie and Jeanette, and she'd be so wonderful in that. So, things of that nature. But to be able to go back and be looked at as an equal in the industry, and I'm not just going back to knock on doors and try to get a job as an actress, but the way I phrase it is I'm coming back locked and loaded.
Amen.
Yeah. I'm ready. And I'm ready to hit the streets to make a difference for a bunch of people. This ain't for me. This part of my life is not for me. It's to make a difference for all the other people anybody that I can touch their lives and help to make them, and whether it's my daughters, whether it's their friends, or whether it's somebody that I don't even know. I just want to open doors for folks. Yeah.
We just want to congratulate you again on being a legacy honoree and joining that sisterhood. Thank you so much for bringing your beautiful family to this event.
Thank you for having
us.
Can I bring my other two daughters up real quick?
They gotta walk all the way around.
No, I just want.
Come on.
Stand up. We look forward to seeing everything that you do next. And we are going to have to get on to the next. Oh, don't act like you're shy now. We're going to have to get to the next session. Thank Jayne and Copper and Savannah and Cheyenne and Zaire.
Thank you guys for having us.
Again.
Thank you so much.
Yes, more power to all of you guys. You're rock stars. Thank you.
Your next sessions, the sooner we can move from the room and get on to them, the better. Enjoy the rest of the day.